This is SuccessVets.com. Are you a veteran or service member looking for advice, insight, and inspiration on making the transition, developing an awesome career, and building a fulfilling life after the military? Learn from others who have done just that. For veterans, by veterans, with your host, Byron Chen.
Hey, Success Vets, Byron Chen here, bringing you interviews with veterans doing awesome things. We're passing along their lessons learned to help you with your career and life after the military. Today, we're talking with Justin Sloan, a Marine veteran who is now a professional writer. He's currently a screenwriter for a video game company, and I'll let him tell you about that one because I think it's pretty cool, but I'm sure I'll mess it up if I get into it. He's done film screenwriting, published books, acted, been a stunt coordinator, just a lot of really interesting things done in his career after the military that I think really highlights the options that service members have when they get out. That's not often talked about. So Justin Sloan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Hey, I'm really excited. I've been looking for somebody more in the creative industry for a while, but could you give the audience a little bit of the background about how you got there?
Yeah, sure. And also, since you mentioned it, I have a resource for you on a whole bunch of other creatives now. I don't know if you've seen that my recent book, Military Veterans and Creative Careers, was published.
Yes.
And inside of that, I interviewed a whole lot of people who've gone on from, all branches of the military to acting, directing, writing, etc. I don't usually plug the book right away, but because you mentioned wanting to get more creatives, that'd be a good source. I'd be happy to connect you with anybody in there for future interviews.
Okay.
Yeah. So
yeah,
that
actually,
story.
Well, before you jump in, since we're talking about the book, I actually have it on Kindle, so it is available for download and for paperback if the audience is interested. But you interview writers, actors, directors, and producers, people that make video games, and a couple others, but really it's kind of like this format, right? I mean, you're interviewing other veterans, asking them how they got into it, what some of their struggles are, what some of their lessons learned are in the creative industry.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right. So you're doing a lot. Let's talk, let's go back to that original question. Like, how did you go from being a Marine to getting out and then, getting into this industry?
Yeah, so it was a long journey. I got out, like typical Marines, I think, or military people, veterans, get out thinking like, oh, I should do something related to what I've been doing because that makes the most sense. That's where the paycheck's going to be.
Yep.
I thought I need to, make a living, have a family someday, settle down and provide for them. It's unrealistic to be creative. All those thoughts that may not be the best because I really do believe now that you should follow your passions and try to figure out as soon as possible what your passions are. But I went off to UC San Diego, did a undergrad degree in Japan studies, my senior year in Japan. And then I was like, what am I going to do now? I went off and did a international relations degree because I thought, well, maybe I want to work international, do something diplomat type work. That was pretty cool. I got to go to Italy for a year and Korea for a summer with that program, and then ended up in DC. It was the Johns Hopkins program, and they have a campus in DC there. And then I got a government job, and I did this. It was all prestigious too. It was a lot of fun. I was thinking like, wow, my career is going great. I did the Presidential Management Fellowship Program, and I was a National Security Education Program scholar, et cetera, et cetera. Good times. But then I kind of reached the job that I thought I was aiming for, which was to be an Asia analyst at the Federal Reserve Bank.
Okay.
And I was like, I made it. And then I sat there and I thought, this isn't exciting. I'm bored.
Okay.
Why did I aim for this? And I realized there's a great book. I think it's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, perhaps by Nietzsche. I'm forgetting the exact book it was from, but there's the quote that said, like, I stopped running for myself. And this is how I finally felt. Like, I decided to stop running for myself and figure out who I really was.
Okay.
And somewhere along the line there, a little bit earlier when I was in the government, I had started writing fiction because it was snowy and all this. I sat back and I said, I'll write a novel before I'm 50 because why not? And then I think it was like 3 to 6 months later, I had a 100,000 word novel, and I was like, wow, it blew me away how much I actually loved it. Like, I'd done creative writing classes when I was younger and thought, this is lame.
Okay.
Why did I do this? But when I sat down and started writing, I was just blown away by how much I loved it and what the creative process did for me. And so anyway, back to the Federal Reserve Bank, realizing that this wasn't the life for me. I made a decision with my wife. We said, as of May 31st, 2014, I'm going to just quit the job and just write full time. I was going to go, jump in all the way.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, the careful side of me said, well, let's not just take all that risk. If possible, let's see what else I can do. So I was doing internships on the side. Like I
Okay.
interned at a literary management company, looking at novels, manuscripts people were sending in to see if we thought they were worthy of representation. They were ready. And then I did one before that at a literary magazine, and I talked to some other ones like Zoetrope to be a reader for them, and et cetera, et cetera. So I was applying for all these positions, connecting through LinkedIn with people, asking to meet for coffee. And then all of a sudden this Telltale Games position came up, and I was like, wow, I loved playing video games when I was young. I love writing. This is a writer job. I looked at the description, and it was heavily, poised towards writers of like screenplays, and I'd been doing a lot of screenwriting.
Okay.
Done a little assignments here and there on that, and so I applied and got the job, and now it's an amazing opportunity where, as you didn't really mention, I'll go into it more now. It's working at Telltale Games, writing. My first game was Tales from the Borderlands, and then I've been writing on Game of Thrones, and now the Walking Dead mini series, which is called Michonne. So it's a spin-off character from the Walking Dead comics and TV show.
So awesome.
And it's all amazing. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, even if the audience isn't into video games, I'm sure they'll recognize all those titles. I mean, those are huge just in popular media right now. So that's pretty awesome.
It's something that, I never knew I would have those on my resume. It's kind of crazy to think that now I've written Game of Thrones material. I've been just fan fiction. It's actually official. George Martin was involved in all that, and that blows me away, because one thing I didn't say here, but I say a lot of like self-publishing podcasts and stuff I've been on, is that George Martin and Game of Thrones were kind of the reason I got into writing, why I wrote that first novel. Is I was sitting around, I'd read the first 3 Game of Thrones books, or Song of Ice and Fire, and I wanted more great books like that. And so I said, well, I'll just try to write them, because I can't find any. And so it's crazy that kind of went full circle in just a matter of years, where now I'm writing on Game of Thrones.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, how cool is that to sort of come back to your inspiration? Your inspiration is now your work.
Yeah, next I just need to write for Harry Potter. That'll be my next one.
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah. So
don't take that, listeners, as a hint or anything. Telltale does not, that I know of, plan on doing any Harry Potter.
You heard it here first, exclusive on Success Vets. Well, Justin, I wanted to unpack that a little bit, because I'm kind of surprised May 2014 was when you started doing the writing full time, because that seems like a relatively short period to get into the industry and to be working on what you're working on now. But before that, let's talk about your journey into from school to your first career. It sounded like there were some cool things there. I mean, you were going to school in San Diego. You were doing that international business. It sounded like you had traveled to other countries. Those things do sound like they could have been your passions. Any reason that you felt that you had it ended up not being a passion when you got to that final job?
Yeah, so just to back up, so I actually started writing, like, kind of committing to it in 2010. And then in 2014 is when I made that leap to be a full-time 100% writer, nothing else.
Okay.
Just in case that wasn't clear, maybe it was.
And 2010, were you already at the time thinking that this is something you might pursue, or did it not come until after? Oh, it did right away?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm sidetracking your question.
No, it's perfect. Yeah.
No, in 2010, it was just like, oh, maybe this would be a fun thing to check out.
Yeah.
I had a buddy I studied in Japan with, who had been a quarterfinalist in the Nickel Fellowship, which is a really high quality screenwriting screenplay contest. And so I was like, well, he did it. Cool. I'll give it a try too. But I tried the novel side to work more for me.
Okay.
And I think it was within a year I'd registered for the Johns Hopkins Masters in Writing and started getting more and more committed. But at the time I was thinking I'll have a 2-track me, 2-track Justin. 1 track is the creative side and 1 side is the career side. And I'm just going to do both 100%. And that wasn't really working out. So I can go back to your question now.
So actually, I mean, I think we should follow that along. Why did you think it was not going to work out with a 2-track career? Because it sounded like you were working during the day, maybe doing writing at night.
Yeah, and so that kind of ties into the original question. So that's good. Yeah. So I was waking up. I'm more of a morning writer usually.
Okay.
Now I have 2 kids, and so it's kind of messing with the schedule. So I've become more of a night writer, just because that's where I know I can get writing done. In the morning, you never know who's going to wake up when. But back in those days, back in the day, a couple years ago, I would wake up at often like 5 o'clock would be my goal. And wake up and get some coffee right away and just sit down and bust out some words before going to work, which was around 8 or 8:30. I lived in DC and my work was a 10-minute walk away, so that was amazing. Uh, and it was government work, which was cool because it wasn't super crazy as far as hours. It
Okay.
wasn't investment banker or anything like that. And so sometimes I would take lunch breaks and write, and often I'd get home from work and just bust right into writing. This is back before being married, of course, because that makes it harder to do that. but so I was working and having lots of fun, like you had mentioned. It was a great time. I was doing when I was in the government, I was doing post-conflict reconstruction and stabilization,
Okay.
which was this interagency effort to send people to countries that were having problems and advise them on how to, move out of their problems.
Yeah.
And I was on the policy side, so I'd go over and sit at State Department with all these high-level people from different agencies and discuss how best to make policy around this. And we'd have little war game scenarios. You could call them tabletop exercises. So it was a lot of fun. It was cool. But even my boss at the time, like, she made a comment here and there, like, you belong in the creative world. Like, she knew how passionate about it I was. And as much as I loved what I was doing, it just wasn't hitting those marks. And the fact that I had to go home and write all the time like that, and that I was always itching to go write, I think that was my big sign that, maybe it wasn't going to work out with a 2-track me. Like that eventually I had to just be like, why was I competing with other people that were so passionate about all this stuff, people who are reading The Economist or Financial Times every day? They're spending 100% of their time focused on that, and I'm divided 50%. So
I see.
my argument, I guess, would be to veterans out there is like, why divide yourself when if you put 100% into something that you're doing, you're going to excel so much faster, and why compete with people that are passionate about something? And like, I was an IT guy kind of in the military. So like, why go be an IT guy when somebody else out there loves that stuff and they're going to all the conferences and, learning everything they can, reading all the books they can, when instead I could be the writing Game of Thrones guy and put all my energy into that because that's what I love.
Okay. Well, I mean, then I would have to follow up and say, I think a lot of people live their lives dividing their interests because that's the best they can do. I'm sad to say, right? Like some of us, we find a job that we like enough and it seems pretty cool and it brings in money, and we haven't found that extra passion or that one focus sort of passion that we would just want to be able to follow, and then two, also be able to make money from it. What would you? I mean, how did you decide upon that when you were making the decision whether or not you wanted to focus on two things or one?
Yeah, and I think I kind of stumbled upon this as my passion. I was trying multiple avenues. I used to draw a lot when I was younger. I drew comics just for fun. And so I was thinking for a little while, maybe I'll try storyboarding, doing all the little artwork for movies and whatnot. 'Cause I'd acted for a while after the military and during the military. And I was thinking, well, that'd be a fun way to kind of get into this industry, was doing all these little storyboards. But man, it was time intensive. It was such a different style of what I was used to. I'm more used to like focusing on the details and trying to get the picture right. And that's not what this was. And it's kind of like that same idea where it sounded cool and it was kind of fun, but it wasn't passion. My advice on it, it's not exactly it is kind of how I did it. What I would say is that people go on like LinkedIn and look at jobs or areas of, interest, look at people who are doing cool stuff that you think that might be something I'd be interested in doing someday, and really look at what they put as, their trajectory for how they got there, and then what they say they're doing on a daily basis.
Okay.
Because they're kind of listing it, for other jobs, and so they're saying, I sit in story meetings all day and discuss character and whiteboard character arcs for a plot line, And if that doesn't sound interesting to you, then why would you look into that? But if you're looking around, this is what I did when I was in my master's degree in international relations too, is I was looking for internships. And so I went on LinkedIn and started looking at all these jobs people were doing and looked at job announcements and whatnot. And I started realizing I was actually originally in for kind of international law. And I started realizing all the ones on international law, nothing about that interested me at all. Well, the topic sounded cool, all the jobs and what people were doing in the field with law,
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
people are doing that. The people, they have their passion, they love it. for me at that time, I was like, well, I know I have this Asia interest, so I started looking at people doing work at like the Treasury and the East Asia office, and went and did an internship there because that was like the list that sounded pretty cool to me at the time. And then later on, I started realizing about the creative writing thing, and I was looking at people at Pixar and looking at what they were doing, and that's what really got my heart fluttering. I was,
I
wow,
see. Okay. Okay.
yeah. So that's the best advice I think I can give is like look at what people are doing, look at all their, and then try to meet up with them and talk about it and see if that's the reality. Like, ask that question: do you feel like you won the lottery? And if they're like, yes, this is like my dream job, every day is awesome, you're gonna see that sparkle in their eye.
Yeah.
That's,
Now,
go.
there's two things that I get from that. First, I think it's really cool that even on the creative side of the industry, or in a creative industry, networking, talking with other people is still vital to figuring out, what you want to do, or figuring out your way into that industry. And I mean, I've talked about LinkedIn and networking on this podcast quite a bit. So really, I mean, I think to do your research, to figure out what you really want to do, you have to talk to another human being, because like you were saying, the title might sound cool and maybe the perception of a certain job or industry might sound cool, but until you talk to somebody else about it and figure out, what they do on a day-to-day basis, you won't know for sure if it's something that'll truly interest you.
110%, and it doesn't stop too. So I did start with that, and that's actually how I landed in the Telltale job, because I had been talking with people at Pixar, and then all of a sudden there was this large migration of people from Pixar over to Telltale, and a couple of those included people I had talked to. And so it was like over a year. I'd messaged them once or twice, nothing crazy. I wasn't like best buddies with them, having shops or anything, but people I had at least talked to who knew how passionate I was. And I didn't say, how can you help me? I said, hey, I'm interested. I want to hear your thoughts. Any advice you have? What was your journey? Just stuff like that.
Right.
And we got into little dialogues here and there. Or, oh, I'm looking at this program that I saw that you attended, such as the UCLA online screenwriting program. And they would give me their thoughts on it and tell me which teachers were cool. So just little bits,
Awesome.
over time. And then now they're at Telltale, and I'm like, oh, hey, I want to apply for that job. And they're like, great, we'll see you here, hopefully. And then I ended up working with a couple of those guys, and one of them ended up being my boss for a little while. So you never know where this networking is going to lead you.
Right,
and then after the fact, same idea, I'm keeping it going. And because of that, I got onto the self-publishing podcast, and I think through that, some writers organization invited me to come be a presenter there, and through other connections in LinkedIn and meeting people online, I'm going to be a panelist at the Austin Film Festival this year, which is pretty exciting because that was my favorite festival, writing festival, as I was trying to learn how to write. So it's all these, it just keeps going, and you can't stop just because you think you've made it. I don't think I've made it because I still have so much further I want to go, but I'm saying, I got into the job, and that doesn't mean you stop. You gotta keep it going and see what's next. Always what's next.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I'm hearing in your journey is that you are a person who really pursues things that he's curious about. Like you said, even right after, because before I wanted to ask, like, how do you choose one passion over the other, or how do you figure that out? And it sounded like you'd already been sort of testing this in your life. Like you went into a little bit of acting right after the military. You said you had drawn when you were younger, and then you were interested in storyboarding, so you went down that path for a little bit before realizing that it wasn't for you. But the important thing wasn't that you tried something and then didn't like it. It's that you kept trying different things and sort of refining that journey. I mean, does that sound like that's what you were doing, sort of subconsciously or on a conscious level? I don't know.
Definitely. And what's awesome is if you can get to a point where you can tie that all into one big story. And by that I mean, when I went for the interview here at Telltale, or when I'm talking to people about screenwriting jobs, it's not all this random stuff I did. It's, oh yeah, I can think about, where a character is coming from because I acted for X number of years, or, I can imagine what kind of shots we would use when I'm writing these scenes because I tried storyboarding, and that's all about like the shots and what angles you look at it. And, oh yeah, I can understand where this militaristic character would come from in the story because I was in the military.
Yeah.
Or
right.
Just different life experiences, living overseas and all this other. If you can tie it all into one big story, it doesn't seem random. It's not all this like stuff that you were just dabbling in, like, dipping your fingers here and there, but it's all one big thread that ties into why this is the perfect job for you. Yeah, and that's kind of where I felt with this patch, is it's all tied into it in some way.
I like that because I think there's such a fear, especially on the private sector side, that if you jump around from career to career, it's going to hurt you in the long term. But at the end of the day, it's however you spin it, right? Like
Yep,
nobody else is right, like leaning over your shoulder trying to figure out what you're trying to do. You're the one who's going to tell that story. So if you can,
exactly.
if you can put it together, then it's it could
Yeah,
sound very coherent and actually make it a strength rather than a weakness.
yeah, and that's some of the best advice I got from my career counselor at Johns Hopkins.
Okay.
She was she had made that point when I went in for an interview, like a mock interview once when I was
Ah,
preparing to either interview at the Treasury or for the PMF program or something like that.
okay.
And she'd asked me the question and said, "How do you sell yourself? Why do you want this job?" And I had given my best spin, and she's like, "No, no, no. Look at your resume. Now take 5 minutes and just think about it, and I'll ask you the question again. And this time I want you to tell a story of how this led to that and that led to that." Which is basically how storytelling went. You like
Yeah.
this happened, and then because of that, this happened, and because of that, this happened. Not just this happened, this happened randomly. So that was just great advice that I've used throughout my career and in storytelling in a way of like make that story and make this happen because of that. This taught me this, and because of that, I did that, and it just keeps going.
Okay. Well, so actually, I think this is a good time to ask this question because since you are a professional storyteller, uh, and it was key to sort of your transition into this new career. I mean, how do you tell a good story? Because I get the concept, I have to keep people interested. But I remember when I was interviewing, I was boring myself after a minute or two of talking. It's not easy to kind of come up with something compelling. And I was wondering if you had any tips for that.
For the storytelling behind the interview, behind the
Yeah,
resume.
and I think, I mean, I imagine there's some commonalities in storytelling, no matter what you're talking about, whether it's, an anecdote you're telling to coworkers or a question that you're answering in an interview. I mean, how do you keep something tight and concise and compelling?
Yeah, and so I'm not sure if I tie them over so well, but on the interview side, it definitely is about saying throwing your passions in there, like writing them throughout. So you're showing like this job, it tied into this passion. So when I'm talking about like acting, it tied into my passion for storytelling and film. And then when I'm talking about storyboarding, it ties into my passion for drawing. That also ties into the overall picture. But I
Okay,
definitely
okay.
think, like you mentioned, anecdotes. When you're in the interview process, you got to make it interesting by using real world examples. I've been on the other side of it, in the government and other places quite often where we're interviewing people. And if all they're doing is talking about, oh yeah, this interests me, but they can't put it into a concrete way, like
I
an
see.
example of how
Okay.
it doesn't have to be exact either. A lot of these jobs, they'll say, we want 5 years of banking experience or 5 years of video game and 2 shipped titles. But it doesn't have to always be that way. If you can convince them that you're passionate about it and that you can list examples that are similar enough. For example, when I was in the military, I mentioned we did all these war games, and so we call them tabletops when I was in the
Yeah.
government,
Hmm.
and we would get people together. We'd drop scenarios. We'd come up with this whole fake like land. We did one kind of based around the Haiti earthquake, and we would get all these players in, and we would test them on the scenario and really be thinking about what the player is going to be getting out of it, how they're going to be acting at the moment, all these big picture items that kind of tie in directly to what we do at Telltale, which is coming up with the whole story, what the player is going to be doing at the time, what kind of player agency, how they're going to control the situation, and what they're going to take out of this. So in my interview for Telltale, I was very much able to tie in what I had done in the military. Although you would think signals intelligence, computer work, martial arts instructor, you would think that stuff would be like 100% on the other side of the line of what we do at Telltale. But if you can spin that thread and make it connect and use real world examples, then I think that's the way to go.
Okay, so use real world examples and make sure or make it all connect, which I think
Yeah.
that
And you
that
can be upfront about it and say, I know this isn't exactly what you're asking for. I know this isn't, 5 years of banking experience, but let me tell you why my experience could make me a better candidate for that. Maybe a more well-rounded candidate with other real world experience that you don't get on a normal basis.
perfect, excellent, excellent. No, I think that makes total sense. But you can explain it so much better than I ever could.
And I think
uh,
people in the military, they have this problem. They think coming out, like, how am I going to use my skill sets?
yeah,
How am I going to, like me, I was an IT signals intelligence guy. How is that going to relate to any kind of passion I want out there? be starting from scratch. And that's the key, is realizing that most jobs are the exact same. You know, your day to day, the mission might be different, but the way you go about it is kind of the same. You're just interacting with people, keeping track of your tasks and your projects. And I don't really feel that my job in the military was that different from what I'm doing now, or what I did in the government or at the federal.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
Yeah, I feel like it's just the mission behind it. Now that's different for people who go out and get jobs, shoveling clay or something. No. But any kind of, like, if you're getting an office environment, you can definitely spin that in the right way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now that you say it that way, I think I totally get that, because even when I was working in medical device sales, but I always viewed it through the lens of, okay, how is this similar to what I was doing in the military? And I always thought about how we were working at small teams. Well, the military was about working in small teams. How do I be a good team member? And it was about communication. And when we were making sales calls is like making a presentation to your commander. So how do I convince my commander that an idea is good? And so same thing with on the sales side. So there definitely, I mean, just about everything I had done in the military definitely had some sort of impact on at least the strategy side of the job. If maybe, I might not be doing the exact, wrench turning thing, but it was still very similar, I think, in concept to what I'd learned in the military anyway.
Yeah, we did, standard operating procedures was one of the big things we did in our office. We did them for, like, currying classified material and all that. And we don't curry classified material in my current job, but we definitely have room for standard operating procedures.
Right.
There's
always room for processes. Yeah.
Exactly. And a lot of people don't think to do that, especially in creative worlds. So if you're the one who comes up with the document saying, here's how this is done, that'll probably help you as you create it, help you to learn and understand what's going around. And everybody else is going to be like, oh, look at this great value added this person brought.
Yeah. So Justin, I want to, if I'm looking to build a creative career or build a writing career, and I'm a veteran, I was wondering, did getting a master's help? Because on the business side, I mean, I hear that all the time. A lot of veterans will get the MBA so that they can go into a corporate job, and not that they anything that they learned getting that MBA is what they use at the job, but they needed that credential to show, hey, I can do this. That's what I hear from a lot of veterans on the business side. So is that the same on the writing side?
Yeah, I think it's about opening as many doors as you can.
Okay.
So some people don't need it. Some people can go out there and make the connections. I know a guy who I'm interviewing for my next book coming out pretty soon, who started a fan site of one of his favorite authors, and because of that, he got involved in helping to make the movie when it came out, or when they were making the movie.
That's so cool.
No, it's that opened the door for him. But my philosophy has always been open as many doors as possible.
Okay.
Because you never know who's gonna come knocking on which one, right?
Right.
So I did all those internships. I was writing. I was putting stuff out there. I was submitting to contests. I was doing the master's program. Telltale could be another door opening for something further in the future. And so my philosophy on that is, yeah, you don't need it, but why not if you can?
Right. Right.
Especially we have the GI Bill coming out of the military, then that's money right there that you can use for a further degree. And it could be a bachelor's degree. It's all about those connections. I had a buddy who went to USC film school, which is one of the top film school, in my opinion.
Okay.
In many people's opinion. And there he made a lot of contacts, and through those contacts, he got a job at Telltale Games. And then another guy did a similar thing. He went on to do, the regular route of directing all these films, and went and did the Hollywood thing for 10 years. And then, sorry about that noise in the back.
Oh, that's all right.
Cycles. And then he went up and kind of came the same route after 10 years in Hollywood and worked with us at Telltale. So it's funny how, like, all these people take different avenues to what they're trying to do. I went this route. I know other people who interviewed in my book didn't go the education route. If you listen to Script Notes, it's an awesome podcast about screenwriting by Craig Mazin and John August. One of them did USC Film School. One of them didn't do any kind of film school or anything like that. And now they're at the same point in their kind of careers, making awesome screenplays, and they talk about that a lot. So it's a cool one to listen to for anybody who wants to delve into this topic deeper.
Okay,
but,
cool.
It's all about whatever branch gets you there.
Okay. So speaking of, I think, exploring every avenue and opening different doors, in your book, you talk about method living, and I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at focusing on a hobby or an interest or a passion and then identifying yourself with it. I mean, could you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, that might be a topic of a future book someday. That's why I decided to throw it in there now, so at least if somebody else writes it first, I can claim it before them.
Genius. Yeah.
Yeah, and it basically just follows that original idea of method acting, where they get into the role 100%. You've all heard of like Johnny Depp like walking around as Jack Sparrow,
Right.
at the club and stuff, wearing the teeth and everything. And I see no reason why not do that in real life. And this is one of my big kind of epiphanies when I was in the career search for creatives. Uh, I realized like my whole everything had to represent who I wanted to be, and even internally and externally. I had to realize that I was a writer and that I was going to write and that I was going to be committed to it, and I had to make sure that the world saw that as well. So that was changing my website, changing my LinkedIn. I had all that experience that I mentioned, the military and the government and stuff, but I basically took it out and just put only writing stuff,
Yeah.
just writing.
Yeah.
And if I didn't have enough to fill it up, I went out there and found something like that internship to make it get more filled up, or publish some short stories or poems or whatnot. And so it's just all about 100% living the life that you want, yourself to be. Jeff Goins writes a series of books about "You Are a Writer, Now Write" or something. I forget the exact title, but it's along those lines. If you're an actor, if you want to be an actor, then stop saying you want to be an actor and hoping auditions will, come your way. Go out there and find them, get in short films, go, network. There's a great organization called Veterans in Film and Television that every veteran who's interested in film and television should be part of. And it's all about the networking. And so why would you not go and, try to go as many of those meetings as you can? Or if you don't live in LA, at least join the group and see how you can be involved, from maybe start a chapter where you live, and just everything you can do in your life. And my thoughts should be geared towards that. Now, of course, that's not excluding, you still have your family and all that stuff. And so I'm not saying like you're now just 100% an actor and nothing else.
Right.
It's just as far as the professional life and your way of thought, that you need to be committed to that.
I think that's so cool that there's an organization out there called Veterans for Film and Television. Like I say constantly on here that if there's something that you're interested in, there's a veteran that also does it that you can reach out to and find out more about it.
Yeah, we have that advantage, like people go into film school and they're getting their contacts. Well, we don't need to necessarily. We have these veterans out there who are doing it. Veterans, they have me. I'm at Telltale. I'm doing my thing.
Yeah.
I just started as a co-host on the Self-Publishing Answers podcast. And so in theory, anybody who wants to write in games, books, screenwriting, they can contact me. And I'm like, oh, you were a vet? That's cool. And I'll try to help them out. I've been doing some mentoring things with some of these different mentor sites where veterans contact me, and they might be very loosely interested in it, but I'll still give them whatever advice I can and help guide them. And so many other veterans are out there doing the same. The 20 or so veterans I interviewed in my book, I think it's more than that even, they're all in that same boat. They're more than happy to help people out. When I emailed them and asked for their advice, they were 100%. Oh wow, you were in the Marines? Yeah, cool. Let me tell you what I can advise.
Right. Like they weren't your friends before you wrote the book.
Not at all.
I mean, you reached out to them to write the book.
Yeah, I only knew one of those guys before I wrote the book, and the rest I now consider at least nice associates, if not if not friends. Some of them, like the narrator of the audiobook, Scott Levy, he was a Marine, and we worked a lot together to make the audiobook come about, and he did an amazing job. And now we're chatting all the time about whatnot. And he's going to come up here for a film festival for a movie he was in pretty soon, and we're going to meet up and grab beers for the first time. And it's pretty exciting how you can just make these contacts through just putting yourself out there.
I mean, even me and you, I think I saw an article about your book, and I saw you on Rally Point, and then I saw you on LinkedIn, and I was like, well, I need to contact this guy at this point. He's a veteran, and he's in this industry. But it's just funny that when you make that connection, then you start to see all these other touch points where you have similarities, and that's what you connect on, right?
Yeah, and it's definitely, like you said, it's exciting to know that other people are out there with similar passions who've gone through, a lot of Marine infantry people might think, oh, everybody after that, they went and became cops and whatever, security guards. But it's not true. A lot of them are, according to my book, are out there acting and directing and producing and doing other cool stuff. My buddy who's at Telltale, he was a producer. Now he's doing game design. He was infantry. So, it's just, you never know where life's going to take you.
Yeah.
You put your mind.
Yeah. Don't use those MOS specialty translators where they say, hey, my buddy used one of those. He was a Marine infantry officer, and I think they said it came back and it said you could do warehouse work and I think supply chain, something totally random, right?
Yeah,
And
who
totally
knows?
not in his interests.
Yeah, I'm trying to get like it'd be awesome, for personal reasons, of course, too, but also to help other people to get this book into any TAPS programs, the separation programs,
Yeah,
just so that people know there are other avenues out there. You don't have to just follow the mold. And lots of people are smart enough to know this, but lots of the people you just don't know what you don't know.
right, right. No,
That's a good way
completely.
to
And
word it.
I mean, to be honest, I think creative fields like acting, writing, directing. I mean, anything in that sort of vein is not something that anybody in the military talks about, right? I mean, the military I
Yeah.
think is a very macho, very like pragmatic. I guess there is no art or creativity, or so people think. Even though I think there's a lot of it when you're talking about leadership and tactics and things like that, but it's definitely not an
Yeah.
avenue like a career avenue that they talk about. And I know they never told me about it in TAPS, even though
Right.
I mean I really enjoy writing. I really enjoy making this podcast, but nobody ever told me that hey, this was an option to even think about pursuing. They don't even talk about it when they're talking about the GI Bill and what you could use it for. But
Definitely. And a lot of people can use it for, writing doesn't have to be a career. It can be a hobby. It can be a way of dealing with issues. We have Sean Garrett was interviewed in my book, and he started writing as a way of dealing with his PTSD. And since he started writing, he hasn't had any flashbacks or issues
oh
like he
well,
used to have. So yeah, he talks about that a little bit in the interview, and it's pretty inspiring. And there's this whole program on the East Coast that Ron Capps has started that I talk about a little bit, which is the Veterans Writing Project. And that the whole idea is they go around
yeah,
and teach veterans how to write and hold little free workshops for veterans. And it's just amazing that they're doing this and that veterans are having a way to explore themselves that like one guy was in a workshop and started telling a story. I think Ron mentions this in the interview, and he starts telling a story about what happened in the military, and his wife gets all teary, and she's like, "He's never told me that story before. He's never told that story to anybody before." It's just like you said, you feel like you're supposed to be macho at some point, and then
right.
you realize that not. I mean, I would say all this stuff, of course, doesn't contradict that. You can still be macho, especially when you're doing all these hardcore, acting roles where you're
Right, right.
punching people in the face and stuff. But
No, I mean I don't.
even writing.
I think it's just the perception, which I think people it helps to throw away perceptions and or evaluate them if they're true or not. Because um, I mean, what's more macho than like pursuing something you really enjoy in the face of, I guess, the doubts of everybody else, right? That takes a lot of courage, a lot of integrity, a lot of you know, personal awareness, which is what I think everybody's striving for. Um, but it's just not
Yeah.
always when there's no clear path or nobody's saying that that is an option. It's hard for you to figure out. Okay, does that work for me? Which is why I mean, going back to it really quick, I really like the description that you have of method living. Pretty much, hey, if you want to do something, do it. Don't wait for somebody to anoint you or say, hey, you're a writer. I think it's kind of like I think it probably comes from school, right? Like when you're a little kid, you want an adult to tell you, hey, you're good at this. And then you become known as a kid that's good at it. Like, oh, you're good at baseball. All right. Then now I'm an athlete kind of thing. But then you become
Right.
an adult. Nobody tells you that. You have to decide and say, this is what I'm doing. And and I pursue it. Because when you're an
Yeah.
adult, the opposite happens. Now people, if you say you're something, people in their mind think, nah, no, you're not. Like until you prove it. So, I mean, the hardest
Yeah,
person to
we don't
prove it
live
is
in
yourself first.
England. We don't live in England where you have to get knighted. Here you can knight yourself. So I
Yeah.
say knight yourself.
America. Yeah.
Although that said, my book is, I try to spread the message to everybody. I put the dedication to the front to all men and women who've served their countries. That's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely 100% skewed towards the Americans, since that's all I interviewed. And so,
Yeah. All right. So we've talked about a whole bunch of resources that that people can use depending on what they're pursuing. I want
Mhm.
to ask: are there any ones in particular? I mean, you've already mentioned a few, but that you would say if somebody's interested in exploring a creative pursuit or writing, like right now, What's the next step that they should take?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main things are to start listening to all the awesome podcasts out there, because there's just so
Okay.
many like yours. There's so many great
Thanks.
people out there spreading the word and
Well,
helping spread other people's word
any
stories.
specific ones that you enjoy?
Yeah, I've on the military specific side, I've been listening to yours, Lead Like a Marine, Joe Crane. Let's see,
Oh, Joe Crow.
Frank.
What's his?
his might be the lead, like the Marine one.
see.
I
Okay.
get it confused with his and Frank Gustafson.
Okay.
They both have great podcasts out there. I have to look them up and put them in the show notes. Perhaps
Uh-huh.
I can send you the links.
Yeah, definitely.
They've been great. And Michael, I forget the last name, Rags. He does Life After the Military, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I got to look him up better. But as far as like the writing itself specifically, there's some amazing self-publishing podcasts and the Self-Publishing Answers podcast. Those
Okay.
are both. I'm on the latter as one of the co-hosts, so there's that. And then the other one was one that got me going early on. It's just they talk about their processes. They went around trying like everything they could in the publishing world. And there's some video game ones out there, but I haven't really latched on to any. On the screenwriting side, like I mentioned, the Script Notes podcast. And then, of course, there's all these classes you could take and internships out there. Like I found my little internship, one of them, it only required like 8 to 10 hours a week, I think. Maybe it was 16, but it wasn't so bad. You could do it on the weekends here and there, like 2 hours in the morning here and there.
What internship
Anything
was that?
you can. That was the one with Folio Literary Management.
Okay.
The one where I was working with a high-class agent and looking at manuscripts coming in.
Really?
And so it's just like anything you can to kind of build yourself, build your resume, and build your craft.
How did you find that internship?
That one was Google. And what's funny is his son was going into the Marines. So that kind of gave me the leg up there.
Yeah.
So I was Googling and emailing a bunch of people because I found quite a few of these little like part-time internships. And he had published some high-class books. He's doing one with Carrie Elwes about the behind the scenes of The Princess Bride.
Okay. Oh, man.
Pretty awesome.
Great movie. Yeah.
Yeah, so I got to read that before anybody else, which is pretty amazing.
Okay.
And awesome movie, of course. And so there's a bunch of them. And I emailed him and I said, I'm interested. I was in the Marines. I think people sometimes are shy to mention this kind of stuff, but I think, you don't want to be bragging, but like, just in the little bottom, maybe of an email, you can just put a little bio that says, I was blah, 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 blah. I've done the blah, blah, blah. And I was in the Marines for 5 years. And then some people just see one of those things that you threw in there and latch onto it and suddenly you're best buddies. And,
Plus, when you write down Marines, the M is capitalized. It kind of jumps off the page at you,
Yeah, you can do it all caps if you want.
I was a Marine. Right. Yeah. Well, I haven't really thought about internships before.
Especially when you're in your 30s, it seems weird.
But yeah, exactly.
Whatever you can do to help set yourself apart, I think.
Yeah, that sounded like a great opportunity. So I think we'll have to dive into that one another time. Yeah. Yeah,
another quick throw out too that we didn't really talk about, but I think it's worth mentioning is that people need to remember that they are kind of starting over. Like if you're all of a sudden decide to go creative, you're not going to jump in as a mid-level or advanced career person. You're kind of going to start over usually, not always.
Yeah.
So that's just something to remember. And like, so
you
don't
talk about like a pay cut possibly, or a big pay cut in your book.
Yeah.
Which is,
I definitely took a pay cut to go creative, but then you get all these other, the opportunity costs of not going creative are much higher in my opinion. So I've had such levels of prestige kind of come around from it that I imagine it's all going to pay off in the end. And when you're doing something you love, I think the hard work is going to put you up to a much higher level than you ever could have gone the other way.
Oh, definitely. Well, Justin, we're getting close to 40-50 minutes on this podcast. I know you're actually driving into work, so I really appreciate you coming on. Before you go, I wanted to ask, how can listeners get in touch with you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, so I have my website where I'm, listing the new books I'm coming out with and everything. And that's justinmsloan.com. So Justin has M as in Michael, Sloan.com. And Twitter, Justin M. Sloan. And, people can email me. I'm open to that. Some people don't like that because they get overwhelmed with emails, but I haven't felt overwhelmed yet. So maybe that's the Marine in me. I don't know. Yeah. But that's, the one I use for that is Sloan Artist, like my last name, SLOAN artist @gmail.com. So feel free to email me, ask me questions. I only have a limited number, but I do have some free copies of the audiobook. If anybody wants the audiobook, Military Veterans and Creative Careers, email me, say you heard me on this podcast, and I'll be happy to send you one. And, any way you can help spread the word and leave reviews is always appreciated, of course.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. And I will definitely link all those resources. Also put your book, I believe it's available on, is it just Amazon?
No, that one is Amazon, iBooks, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, name it.
Okay, definitely link
I think
that.
it's everywhere.
Link to your
and then the
webpage.
audiobook is iTunes, Amazon, and Audible.
Okay. Yeah, definitely put all those on. And I'm wondering, before we go, are there any parting words of advice for the audience?
Uh, I think nothing that we've already covered, but just remember to not have that chip on your shoulder. Don't go out there thinking that you're gonna be the top of your game and you're amazing because you're in the military. Like everybody says, it's a sprint, not a marathon. Or sorry, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Whichever way you want to look at
Gotcha.
it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So I think when you're like we mentioned, you kind of start over. But as your career advances, the fact that you're in the military is gonna put you way ahead of everybody else. It's a matter of when. So don't be like, oh, it's been a year, I should be ahead. No, it's gonna come, but be patient.
Well, I really appreciate that because I definitely feel that sometimes like I'm behind. But I think I'm starting to realize now, talking to people like you that are doing such cool things that like it's okay. Like take a step back, figure out what you want, take that small step forward, but just keep pushing forward.
Exactly. 3 steps back, 10 steps forward.
Well, Justin, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This has been a great conversation, and it's provided so many resources and tips and techniques just from your journey. So I wish you the best of luck in your career, and looking forward to see all the cool things that you're doing in the future.
Thanks. Same to you with the podcast.
Thank you.
Are you leaving the military? Need advice on what to do? Learn from other veterans on successvets.com.